What was
said.
overstated? Wait. What did I just say that was overstated?
Yeah, absolutely. My name's Matt Dearden. I teach history, con law as an adjunct, but then my main day job is I run my own law firm, do business law and that type of stuff. So, have been a fan of your stuff for a while, Destiny, and I probably don't agree with you on everything, but love to have this conversation.
Yeah. All right. Well, did you have a particular spot that you wanted to? Oh, wait, real quick. Did you say who you were on TikTok? That's where you post the majority of your content, right?
Yeah, I'm Matt Dearden 49. I have some fake accounts out there, as I'm sure you're familiar with, but yeah, that's the main one.
Okay. What did you have a particular thing in mind you wanted to chat about, or?
Yeah, I did. So I've watched a lot of your stuff over the years, and I recently watched your interview with Alex O'Connor, and I thought it was really good from a few months ago. And you brought up something on there that really resonated with me, and I wanted you to expand upon it a little bit. What you had said specifically was about how the right, particularly the right in 2024-25, doesn't have a lot of standard bearers ideologically. And because they don't have that, they're not able to discuss policy. And you've said that essentially all of the arguments with the right now occur kind of at the culture war level. And there's just back and forth, mudslinging back and forth. And so you have to engage at that level in order to even get down to any of the actual policy stuff. And most of the front runners right now, the Tim Pools, pretty much the entire cast of the Daily Wire, Candace Owens, many others, they can't engage any deeper than the mudslinging. And I think that's true. And I lean conservative. I do not consider myself MAGA whatsoever, but I think that's an accurate picture right now of much of the right. And it's a picture of some of the left too. Don't get me wrong. For sure, there's people out there. But can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think it's just an interesting starting point.
I feel like one thing that the right has been able to do, I would say they stumbled into it more than anything else with Trump, is I feel like right now politics is a lot about capturing attention and how much you can basically stay in front of somebody's eyes. Ironically enough, it's kind of how being a YouTuber or streamer works. The more that you post content, the more you're spending time live, the more people see you and you're relevant and people just keep watching you. I think that Trump is really good at doing that just because he's so attention hungry. So he's tweeting all the time, he's truthing all the time, he's doing interviews, he's constantly making statements and getting up to stuff. And I think that when you have a lot of attention, now when you have that attention, when you're putting issues in front of people, if you talk to an ordinary worker about the amount of aid that we should send to Ukraine or what good fiscal policy is or whatever, like nobody thinks much or cares about that. Whereas if you start invoking like the trans athlete stuff or whatever culture wars issues, or if you speak about trade wars in a more narrative format, like these countries are robbing us, it just like drives people's, I guess, excitement up for politics and it gets you on their side more. So and it used to be that people would kind of do that, but at least on the back end of things, there'd be policy debate going on. But now it feels like the culture war stuff has literally taken over the back end, as we've seen today with these unbelievable terrorists that I guess have actually gone through now.
Yeah, I think you're right in many respects. And a lot of the people that argued for these conservative oriented, I should say, policies over the years gave up so much ground intellectually the moment Trump took office, because especially the second term, because he started passing or instituting all of these executive orders, which would go against any type of limited government belief, any type of, hey, we're going to limit the power of this branch or any separation of powers. And they've said, let's put him on Mount Rushmore now. And so I think that's going to be hard to recover from for a lot of the right.
Yeah, we saw Matt Walsh. Hard time like taking. I don't know if I'll be able to take any conservative debater seriously for the next like 10 years. Just seeing how insane this presidency has been in the first month. And then I don't know what you're going to bring up with Walsh, but for Walsh and Shapiro, I remember in 2016 reading just the most condemnatory articles from them about how they would never vote for somebody like Donald Trump and how he was just, he goes against everything a Christian should believe in. And his rhetoric is insane. And to see the Republican point of view change based on how likely it is that Trump is going to be in office again is so sad to me. Like,
what do you think a conservative is? Like, what would be your definition of conservatism as an ideology? Not maybe as it exists in 2025, but what it is traditionally.
What it is traditionally? Man, I'm sure that's evolved over time a lot. I guess when I grow up, my really macro view of liberals versus conservatives is basically just who has the responsibility to take care of the people around them. It feels like liberals have this belief that the government has the ability to take resources from and distribute them in the most efficient way possible to a large group of people, some that might be left behind otherwise. And conservatives feel more that people in their own communities have a better ability to distribute help in a variety of ways to the people around them, because these are people you care about personally. You distribute your own money better. You don't need some algorithm or bureaucracy to do it for you. That's like a very macro level difference, I think, in the approach between both.
But who do you think gives government that power? Like, who gives government the ability to choose what to do with its resources, or what rights to prioritize or even take or remove?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on how philosophical you want to be with that question. I mean, we could say on one level, the Constitution gives that ability. We could say on another level, the Constitution authorizes Congress to create laws that would give them that ability. We could say on another level, it all comes from the people ultimately, because we could always coup the government. I don't know, I guess what exactly you're asking.
Well, a lot of people would say that rights themselves come from God, and for example, the Declaration of Independence alludes to that. I would imagine that's probably not your perspective.
I don't think it's relevant whether you think your rights come from God or not. I mean, the government is there to create it to protect whatever rights we have. But regardless of if you think they come from God or not, I don't know if that would influence too much what you think government's role should be.
Right. And I think even when someone like Thomas Jefferson said that in the Declaration, he's not making any type of truth claim. He's using it as a rhetorical document to advance his position, which they should be able to release themselves from Britain. But my point is, I think that what conservatism is based in is probably this idea that there should be a limited government with power in certain spheres. And once that power expands over those certain spheres, there should be consequences from the people that put the people in power, initially. And so I think that would, I don't know, I think that would align for the most part with a lot of what the founders believed, right? So these founders such as, Madison, Hamilton, or John Jay, who wrote the Federalist Papers, they were like, we need a powerful government, but it needs to operate within certain limits, within checks and balances, separation of powers, pulling on these ideas of Locke and others, and saying if the government goes beyond that, though, the people have a right to overthrow the government or adjust the government in such a way that it is actually in place to protect those rights. And I think that that's actually being turned on its head with Trump, because the idea now is that now that we are in power and we have kind of this nationalist populist movement with Trump right now, the government can do whatever it needs to do to accomplish what Trump believes are legitimate ends. And you see huge swaths of the population just agreeing with that, who formerly would have held to these more conservative limited government mandates that have been around for, I would argue, decades. I mean, don't you think it's been tossed on its head a little bit?
A little bit, maybe. I think the issue is that what's happened is I feel like we don't really have any defenders of democracy, defenders of like liberal democracy, liberal not in like the liberal conservative sense, but just in the idea of our system. Our system hasn't had any defenders, it feels like, for quite a while, at least in my lifetime, at least like maybe a decade and a half, because the left is always demonizing, capitalists and the government lobbyists and everything else. And now, after the death of the neocon, now the right has been attacking the government as just being this huge scam bureaucracy deep state. And when you don't really have anybody in society that's defending the order, the actual like liberal order, then you end up in this world where everything is permissible as long as it's advancing your side's interests. So you might have somebody who says like, oh, I don't believe in this particular thing, but what they really mean to say is, I don't believe in this thing when it's used against me, but I do believe in it when it's used against the other side.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So who's out there right now on either the left or the right that you admire and is actually advancing these concepts ideologically and not just from a tit for tat type of thing at the surface level?
I don't know right now. I'm not sure.
Like anybody?
I literally just tweeted like an hour ago or 2 hours ago that like the Democrats need to have a strong, vocal, like obvious person who is kind of serving as this counterposition to Donald Trump right now. And I feel like we don't have that strong voice right now. I feel like it doesn't exist at this moment in time.
Who's been the best Democrat candidate for president in your lifetime?
This is gonna be really unpopular, but For all the issues with his age, I thought that Biden did a phenomenal job in office. I think he tried really hard to do that spirit of the country, to bring us together. There was a ton of joint legislation passed. He did his best to avoid demonizing or attacking the other side. Even in that speech that they try to rip that quote from with the red background, where he talks about MAGA Republicans, like he even says in the next line, he doesn't even think a majority of the Republicans are MAGA Republicans, and he's talking about the election deniers, like he specifies that. I think that Biden did a phenomenal job, given how crazy the hand he was dealt, I guess. But
what about Obama?
I was younger, and I'm very hesitant to rely on my memory now for anything before I started like studying stuff with more depth. I feel like Obama did a decent job. Like, I appreciate the ACA. McConnell made it obviously really hard for anything to happen once he lost his congressional power, once Obama lost his any majorities in Congress. But I don't know if I would say like Obama was a phenomenal president or did an amazing job, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of what you said makes sense for sure. I think it's hard because, like you said, in the past decade, conservatives have become the anti-government party. And it's anything that the government does is the deep state, or it's the swamp, and it needs to be drained. And that's never been what conservatism is. I think conservatism has always wanted to play within the limits of what's been given as the government. But I don't think governmental actions are inherently wrong. And I don't even think Reagan would have thought that. I think that Reagan would have spoken much more to a broader view of the good of government. And it's come to the point that in the last 10 years, I've seen a complete shift in the way that conservatives have viewed government.
Sure.
As a base negative.
Yeah, and I think Trump even recently has now finally begun to tear into Reagan as well, where, what did he say? That he thought Reagan was dumb on tariffs or something? Or was it something different? He started to criticize Reagan's view on things, and it's like, okay, geez, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Reagan probably wasn't as good of president as a lot of conservatives remember him to be. But I think he did speak pretty effectively to kind of the conservative movement as a whole. And obviously he had to be more hawkish than a lot of conservatives probably would have liked, just with the ending of the Cold War. But he was, a pretty vanilla politician in many aspects, I think. And he accomplished some good things. He rode on the wave of some good economics. But at the end of the day, he's probably not a god.
Sure, maybe. I don't know enough. I haven't studied any of it in depth, so I can only give like surface level takes on it, but sure.
Yeah. So is there anything that you've liked about Trump's first, 4 to 6 weeks in office?
Probably not, no.
Anything?
I think it's been beyond disastrous so far. I don't think anybody would have guessed it would have been quite as chaotic as it's been so far. There might be
of his appointments? Like his appointments, or
I mean, like the only one that was like barely normalish would have been Rubio, but Rubio is totally sold out now to Trump's view on everything as well. So I don't know. What are some things that you think I should be in favor of or should be happy with?
I mean, he's definitely taken a hammer to a lot of stuff with his executive orders. So I don't love that, even if I can appreciate some of the end goals.
Oh, wait, I can give two. Getting rid of the penny, I guess, is good. That seemed like a waste of money.
Yeah.
And maybe the paper straw thing. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of silly for an executive order on that, but I don't like paper straws. But there you go. There's two, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about the tariff stuff going on with the 25% on Mexico, Canada today?
I think that on paper, it's kind of boring. The stock market stuff is exciting to follow, but I feel like it's probably some of the saddest stuff that we've ever gone through. I feel like everybody was wondering what the fighting would look like between Russia and China, and now we find ourselves a month into his presidency, and the biggest fights we are having are with our allies over quasi acts of war. These like crazy tariffs between the EU. I think right now, as it stands, we have larger tariffs against our trading partners than we do against China. I don't understand why. Nothing about the biggest issue that I've had with Trump is I don't have like a theory of mind for him to understand like what his coherent vision is of America and the world. Like, let's say that we hate.
I don't think he doesn't have one.
Yeah, unfortunately,
I really don't. I don't think he has one.
Like, if you were going to start fighting with China and fighting with Europe and fighting with Russia and everybody else, okay, fine. But then why would you make such an enemy out of Canada and Mexico? These are going to be your new most important friends if we're going to, fight the rest of the world, you would think. But
yeah. No, I agree. I was under the impression for a while that he was just solely trying to use those numbers as leverage. And I'm hopeful there'll still be a very short-term tariffs to kind of try to bring them to the table to rediscuss the Mexico, U.S., Canada agreement or something like that. But
well, wait, but even that position
long-term.
is crazy, right? Like this was an agreement that he negotiated
Maybe.
like 5 years ago. Why would it be that like
Right.
I'm going to bring out like basically the nuclear trade options to renegotiate a deal? Couldn't he have just like tried to approach them in a conversation first? Like,
Yeah, I mean, maybe, but that's not Trump. This is what he did all throughout his first term. He would throw out these wild threats, especially to countries that, other countries, and he'd just say, "Hey, this is," and he'd use it as an anchor in his negotiation, and he'd move forward. Whether it's a wise strategy or not, I mean, but he did negotiate that agreement to replace NAFTA, but it was set for, I think, renegotiation next year, anyways, in 2026. So I think he just wants to start off and renegotiate it again.
yeah, I guess, but I don't approve. I don't know where this, I don't know if it's because it's just been normalized, but this like crazy, I call this like the retard defense, where Trump can basically do whatever and it's justified as some basis of negotiation. Like, I feel like Trump could say, we've got a lot of extra nukes that we need to unload. Maybe they'll go to Mexico City, maybe they'll go to Toronto and Vancouver, but I'm only saying this as a negotiating tactic. And Republicans will be like, well, I mean, he's not actually going to do it. And it does bring them to the table. Yeah, but it's destroying our reputation and it's destroying our relationships with these like historic friends and allies of ours. Why would we ever do this? Even if he did manage to negotiate something after these threats and after these tariffs, it's still bad. It's still on the net, not good. We probably could have negotiated it anyway.
No, you're probably right, and I've said before, I think it might backfire on him, and we'll see. I didn't even think he was actually
it's already backfired. We've already done the tariffs. Like the damage is already done. There's no way of undoing this damage now. Now we've just suffered some long-term reputational harm. Even if we negotiate something good after this, it's still been a net bad for everybody. The fact that we're even wasting time talking about this as a country, and that with Canada and Mexico and now the entire European Union stressing over it, this is all like a net bad for our reputation. No?
No, I think you're probably right overall. I think it is a net bad for the country. But do you think, though, that he has a future plan related to this, or is he just all making it up as he goes? Is he just hoping that it...
I can't see any future plan. I don't know. I don't know what he hasn't even made any demands. Like, sorry, go ahead.
Well, he's made some vague demands. Like he said, I want Mexico to do better on the border, and he's mentioned fentanyl, but no specific demands.
Well,
right? At least I've not seen any.
But that's bullshit, right? Like in order for the National Emergencies Act to give him the ability to leverage these, or to these tariffs, he has to have a national emergency, right? So that's why he did the border thing in the north and the border in the south. But we're not really worried about fentanyl coming from Canada, right? Like that's not like a real thing.
No,
he's just saying it for the legal justification to do economic warfare.
Right. You're probably right, but at the end of the day, you have to
hold on. I don't understand this. Wait.
No.
I'm probably right. I'm definitely right. Do you think that we're so concerned with fentanyl from Canada that we're ready to nuke our relationship with them? Okay. So I'm definitely right. There's no way there's a coherent thought there outside of economic warfare.
But my point is, do you think there's a second act? Do you think, and I don't know this, I don't know. I truly don't. And I think it's a mistake. It obviously hurts both countries. But do you think there's a second act to this? Or do you think it's just, hey, indefinite 25% tariffs on our two neighbors?
I think that at some point, if the markets continue to slide, if prices go up, and if he starts to become politically unviable, and it has to be him, not other Republicans, because Trump doesn't care if other people lose elections. But if Trump becomes politically unviable, if the stock market slides and he's getting bad coverage, he's seeing too many mean tweets at him, then I think he'll go back to it. And I think what will happen is he'll renegotiate something that basically looks exactly like it was before, like he did last time, and he'll call it a win, and we'll go back to the status quo, except now with our reputation harmed.
Do you think reputation on the world stage is important?
Yeah, for sure.
In what sense? I'm not disagreeing. I'm just asking in what, like, how important should it be for a president to have a good reputation on the world stage?
I feel like it's essential because I feel like it's what gives you the ability to leverage, you're leveraging your reputation as a form of soft power instead of doing like actual, it would still be soft power or hard power things like doing tariffs or doing, actual like kinetic strikes on people. Like I feel like reputation is good because then we can avoid stuff like this. We have a good reputation with leaders. You can sit down, you can have negotiations without having to do crazy tariffs or attack people first, basically economically.
Do you think Trump's reputation is as bad internationally as people say?
Well, maybe not with North Korea, not with Putin, not with Orban, but I think with Europe, I think that it's possible we've already done irreparable harm after that Vance speech. And with Canada and Mexico, I think our reputation is severely harmed. Yes, I think our reputation right now is probably incredibly bad. Why, do you not?
Yeah, but I think it wasn't always the best with Biden either. So I think that I think he was seen as a little bit of a weak leader. I don't have necessarily any hard data to show that, but just by perception alone, even in his own country, I feel like there was that going on a little bit internationally, don't you think?
In what sense?
Just even the age thing. Ukraine. I think that was a big deal.
Oh, no, but I mean, like, what would I look to? Because Biden was able to cobble together, even with incredibly tepid support at home, a pretty good international coalition to do military aid and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Like, he did that, the releasing of the intelligence and everything to call that invasion coming ahead of time. He was able to restrain Bibi at least twice in very important ways, I think. And Bibi waited, whether it was towards the end of the war, it was letting all those people leave Rafah. It was like 1 million people. And then I think a month into the war, he was able to get a week ceasefire for humanitarian aid to come in. Those were really key big things. I don't see I know there's like all the age jokes in the U.S., but like I don't know where I'm seeing like the rest of the world hated Biden or didn't respect Biden or anything. Like, I don't know if anybody was thinking those things, or if they were, I don't see how it came out in any measurable way.
Yeah, I don't think hated is the right word, but I do think so. The Ukraine-Russia stuff, I think, is a little bit overstated. The international community needs the United States to impose any type of sanctions on a country like Russia because of the U.S. dollar. So the fact that Biden was somehow central in banding together all of these countries to go and put sanctions on Russia or something, they needed the United States in order to even effectively do it. So yeah. I don't know that was him. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was him.
Well, but it could have been, if it was Trump, I don't know if we would have done it.
You don't think the U.S. would have put sanctions on Russia?
No, I don't. I have no confidence in that, no. Given the rest of Trump's foreign policy, I don't know why I would even begin to think that. He abandoned the allies with the Kurdish people. He didn't do anything when Saudi Arabia was attacked by Iran for the first time. He didn't do anything to... He didn't do anything against Ukraine, Russia when he was in office and Crimea had been occupied and that Russia was sending more troops into the Donbass. Like, I don't see anything with Trump standing strong with foreign allies ever, unless I missed something foreign policy wise that.
Yeah, you might be right. And so I think there was an escalation, though, and that escalation is what was the impetus for a lot of these new sanctions against Russia, though, during Biden's term.
Sure,
that makes sense. It started.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It started back, but your point still stands. Yeah, I think that there's certainly questions on the world stage about whether Trump is a good, representative, I guess, of the United States abroad. I think.
Well, I don't think I'm not aware of there's questions there. I think people, overwhelmingly are saying no, right? Like Europe is talking about abandoning a U.S.-led world order now after that Vance speech, and now for supporting Ukraine.
But what does that mean? Though?
It means that
like a U.S.-led world order, because the dollar's not going anywhere, and that the economics of it all is kind of what governs the world order.
The economics follows the military supremacy, though, right?
Well, yeah, in a way, but it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. The military supremacy can only come with the power of with the power of the currency, and in which case the dollar is far and away. I just don't think you can separate it out.
Well, no, they talk about it a lot in the Federalist Papers. Having a strong enough Navy, military to ensure free trade, to ensure trade routes through waterways is incredibly important. Imagine the United States is the global reserve currency and we have the dollar and blah, 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 but we have no Navy, we have no military. And the Houthis go back to bombing ships that are trying to go up through the Suez Canal. Well, what do? Do you hope that Britain stops it, or France, or maybe China or India does? Like, the United States having a strong economy obviously helps do, dollar-denominated trades. If you're talking the petrodollar, or just having the U.S. as being the world reserve currency. But if we didn't have the military to ensure that those dollars could reach every single market on the planet, it's hard to say if it would still enjoy that status. I agree that it's not like, Trump pulls back from the whole world stage and the U.S. drops its reserve currency status in 5 years. Probably not. But it definitely becomes more questionable. And I think the military part is an important part of that.
But do you think that there's any threat to the U.S. military at this point?
Yes.
Like in other words,
Donald Trump.
Well, maybe you're right. But like what I'm saying is, if the EU says, "Hey, we want to provide a threat, or we want there to be a threat to the United States as the head of the world order," I mean, what's the pathway to even do that, regardless of what you think of Trump?
Well, it would be questions about what does it look like when Europe has to deal with Russian security threats, right? Right now, they look to the United States to lead those conversations, and it has to do a lot with, how do we feel about sanctioning people or cutting off trade or energy, whatever. Maybe there's a world where Europe starts to make decisions where they say, okay, well, not only are we sanctioning Russia, since the U.S. is going to join us, we're sanctioning the United States as well. Now the U.S. suffers economically. Or maybe in a worst case world, there's a world where the EU starts to align more with Russia or China and India because the United States just isn't providing much anymore in terms of military security or economic benefit.
But that's not going to happen in the near future. I mean, I don't see any pathway of that happening. Of the EU aligning more with like Russia or China?
I mean, but why haven't they in the past? It's because they've been aligned with the United States, right?
Who? Like
The
the
Western
EU?
Europe, yeah.
But like just look at the conflicts of like that even NATO has caused in Eastern Europe. There's no pathway for the EU to all of a sudden say, oh, I know that there's 30 years of conflict between what we've wanted and how far east we've wanted to expand NATO, and then what Russia's wanted, and now we're just going to push all that under the rug and align. It just doesn't seem probable.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem probable, I agree, but that's because it was never probable before that the United States would just unilaterally withdraw from the entire world stage. I don't think anybody ever considered that happening because it's stupid for a billion different reasons, right? But I mean,
Yeah, I
NATO doesn't
agree. I
exist
agree.
really absent the United States of America, right? I guess you have a nuclear umbrella still with like the United Kingdom and France. But I mean, like absent the United States, NATO looks significantly different, right?
Oh, well, yeah, it's definitely not the same thing. And I disagree with, I don't think we should be withdrawing from, I don't think we should withdraw from the World Health Organization. I don't think we should withdraw from NATO. I think all of these are important. I'm for globalization. I think it's essential in the world that we live in today.
But what is
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. Yeah, I don't think it's beyond the scope of imagination to see the EU, become closer to India or China. Maybe not Russia, but at least India or China more so than the United States. If the U.S. decides that they want to abandon every single thing that we do internationally.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's possible. I don't think it's imminent, but it's certainly possible. But I think people are probably overstating the damage that withdrawing from some of these international organizations will do in the short term. So I think that Trump has 4 years, and I think there could be a lot of damage in those 4 years, but I think that it's going to swing back. And I don't think there's any world that exists in the next 4 years that would preclude the opportunity of the United States to step back on its pedestal, if you want to put it that way, after Trump's term.
Maybe, but I think but I don't think people want to deal with a country that is suffering, domestic schizophrenia, right? Like to go from Obama to Trump was a swing, and then from Trump to Biden was a swing, and then from Biden to Trump was a huge swing, and then from Trump to another Democrat? Like, I don't think anybody's going to want to do anything with the United States. I know it's the separation hurts, which is why people have been putting it off for so long. But if they start to separate, and if they do start to build closer relations with India, with China, then you look at the United States and it's like, okay, that's cool that you guys have a new president, but let's see where you guys are at like 4 years from now, because why the fuck would you trust any of these things that's coming from the United States?
Yeah, but I think you have all those same questions for those other players. Like, why would you trust anything coming from China, who's struggling with their own economy right now? There's going to be
China
just
might be struggling,
as much
but they don't have the same, like, we're friends with these guys and now we totally changed our mind. China, the CCP enjoys relative stability politically when it comes to their relationships with other countries, right? I don't think China is fractured politically at all like that.
But even their actions on the world stage are up to the level or far exceed the level of what Trump has done. Even the World Trade Organization has said that, where you have the Chinese government that is subsidizing Chinese companies, and they're dropping below priced products into foreign markets to take market share, and that practice has been routinely criticized by the World Trade Organization and others. And I just don't see how there would be any level of trust there too. I'm not even arguing pro what Trump has done. I'm just saying, like, I don't think the EU makes any step in a positive direction by establishing or aligning itself with any of those other countries.
Sure. And I agree that like China might engage in trade practices that people don't like, but all of that is just pales in comparison to the United States one day saying, we're going to do 25% tariffs on anything, like eat shit. It's like, it pales in comparison, not even close to how the insane change in policy that is.
I don't know. I don't think it pales in comparison. I think it's of a different kind, but I think it's just as underhanded, in many ways, because the Chinese government won't admit, like they'll do this stuff. It's all known that it's happening, and it's severely damaging, in many cases, artificially damaging foreign markets. And I don't see how that's necessarily any better than instituting some tariffs on countries.
Well, I mean, you're dramatically underselling instituting some tariffs. So what you just said was the important part, though. When you say it's happening and everybody sees it happening, you know what to get when you're working with China, right? They're probably subsidizing their goods. You know that if you start a company there, they have to partner with a Chinese one. They're probably stealing your IP. It sucks. It's annoying. It's not cool. But you know what you get with China. But with the U.S., you don't know what you're getting. And that's the issue, is the lack of stability. Not necessarily good or bad, but just the stability. And a 25% tariff out of nowhere is earth-shattering.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, there's going to be tariffs, but you're right. The Mexico-Canada ones are terrible, and it's going to be bad for both countries.
Well, we've been speaking about doing it to the European Union as well soon, right? Aren't we talking about 25% tariffs on the EU too?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think
so casual
again,
bringing it up. There's just like an insane 20, like out of nowhere, 25% tariffs. Like holy shit, these are like earth-shattering tariffs.
But tariffs, I 100% agree. That would be stupid, really damaging to anyone involved in that situation. But tariffs have become this kind of weird left-right issue, and they're not inherently bad. I mean, yeah, in an ideal world, we'd be in a situation where we didn't need a tariff, but that's not an ideal world. I mean, there's not free trade on the global stage, and you know that. Like there's not a perfect entry and exit point for everybody's product, what they produce well, what they need to import. It's just.
I think we're having a huge disagreement of magnitude with the way that we're speaking about these things. This is like the difference between like a couple that like playfully like pokes each other in the car, or like a guy or a girl who like licks their finger and puts it in their ear or whatever, like annoying shit like that. And then one person one day, has like a pair of brass knuckles loaded up and they just whoosh, as hard as they could into the other person's face. And we're like, yeah, I mean, people kind of like poke each other and annoy each other sometimes, and it happens. Like, no, we're on a totally different level. What is the aggregate estimate of tariffs, of tariff burden around the world is supposed to be like 3%, I think is the estimate. I don't know if I read that in a Krugman article yesterday, but like that's about the average. 25% tariffs. It's not like Trump came out and said, we don't like how Canadian lumber markets are subsidized. We're doing a 5% tariff on Canadian lumber. Or we don't like how this is subsidized in Europe. We're going to do a 10% or 7.5% tariff against European exports for cars. It's these blanket, broad market, 25% tariffs, and all the stated reasons are insanely ridiculous. Like
I agree. I 100% agree with you. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think that tariffs across the board are a bad idea. But my point is there's going to be some. There's going to be some tariffs in a global economy. Like, I mean, did you agree with Biden's tariffs? In general? Like, did you feel like they were reasonable?
I think that if you want to tariff, I believe his were focused on, I think it was EVs and microprocessors, was it?
Like solar panels.
Maybe, yeah.
Like you said,
if you want to, if you want to do tariffs and your stated goal is national security reasons, then that's fine. At least you're honest about the tariffs, because we're understanding.
But is that honest though? Like,
yes, because you're going to take an economic hit, but you do it for national security reasons, as opposed to Trump, who's pretending that these tariffs are going to benefit us economically, which they're absolutely not.
No, I agree. And they're terrible revenue generating tools, as we saw in like the Great Depression. And many other times. But here's the thing. I don't think it's just for national security reasons that tariffs are in place. That's where I'm pushing back. So I think that you do tariffs at other times you institute tariffs at other times, for example, to protect domestic industry. I think that's well accepted. And you might do it for a short time to protect domestic industry. You probably can't do it across all industries. Well, you definitely can't do it across all industries. But like the EV tariffs, you think that's security related?
If he gave that reason, but it's also possible. Like, I'm a hardcore capitalist and free markets guy, so I mean, there are probably tariffs that Biden did that I wouldn't agree with. But I'm just not. I'm not trying to say you agree with.
Sure,
but I would say that a tariff targeted towards China on one market is still galaxies apart, multiverses apart from a 25% blanket tariff across our closest trading partners that we share our largest markets with.
Yeah, it is. You're right. I mean, I agree with you. I'm trying to come up with some reason. Hopefully there's a second act. I don't know. But I agree. I think it is different in kind for sure.
What do you think Trump's goal is with the tariffs?
Well, if you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said, I think he's totally just throwing that number out there for better or for worse, by the way. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. In hopes that he'll get, maybe there were some backdoor conversations, some phone conversations that he was trying to get Canada or Mexico to do something.
Well, we see that, both leaders have said, or at least Trudeau has said, they haven't spoke. So there are no, unless he's lying about that. So it doesn't seem like there are any backdoor conversations.
But I'm saying that would be the most sympathetic kind of view of what those public demands were, if that makes sense, or the public threats were of the 25% tariffs. But as it's played out, yeah, I think it's a disaster that they went into effect today. And you can just hope that it's a short-term thing until Trump is satisfied or gets what he wants, or maybe it is a redo of that agreement.
Do you agree that it's not good to negotiate with our partners by basically being bullies? Or
I wouldn't go that far. I think that there's going to be some bullying on the world stage, even with partners. I think that
there's a magnitude question here. You say some bullying. This is a historic level, insanely high, broad market tariff. This is not just simple. This is like taking the sledgehammer to our economies. Why would this ever be a good way to deal with your closest friends?
I agree that it's not a good way to deal. I'm just saying that what you said is this a good way as far as bullying our partners to get what you want on the world stage? And I think sometimes you do have to, but not in this specific way. I don't agree with it.
Okay, and I didn't see any indication that we needed to here right now. Did you? I haven't heard any indication that Canada is unwilling to work with Trump on some deal, or that Mexico would be unwilling to work with Trump on some. I mean, again, we literally renegotiated NAFTA with both these people, and I don't remember there being. I don't know when Trump became obsessed with tariffs, but I don't remember the tariff threat on either. On that former renegotiation of NAFTA 5 years ago at all.
Don't you think he became obsessed with tariffs when he realized it was like an attention grabber for him? So he started talking about tariffs, and then he thought, I'm just going to raise the ante and talk about it more. Like, do you think that Trump actually believes that tariffs can replace the income tax?
I don't know. He might. The fact that he just did this right now, I don't know.
Wait, you really think he might believe that?
Trump comes off to me as a fucking moron, so it's possible that he does think that. Yes, I have no idea. It seems that could be the case.
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think no. I mean, we've kind of tried that before. Like we've I would say most recently in the 1930s, early 30s, we went super tariff heavy, and we didn't probably even go tariffs across the board at that point, but that definitely exacerbated the Great Depression.
Sure.
It made it much worse. So yeah, I don't think he's going to try that, but we'll see, I guess. I mean, there's no world, I think, where he tries it fully. Do you?
I mean, we wouldn't have said that he would have tried these tariffs a few months ago, no?
Maybe. Well, here's a question. Do you think Elon knows what he's doing?
In regards to what?
In regards to the whole Doge thing.
No, I think Elon is entirely inept at almost everything I've seen him talk about or do. Unless there's some master plan behind the scenes and he just pretends to be retarded on every interview and every tweet that he does.
I actually kind of do agree with you in the sense of he doesn't ever sound very smart when he's talking. He kind of bumbles through. Like for example, if he was on one of your streams or something, I think that would be a really weird dynamic, I guess.
Sure.
But my hope is that even if it's not exactly being done in a way that everyone agrees to, I do think that he's probably trying to make some good changes. I mean, wouldn't you agree that the bureaucracy's become a little bit too big in the executive branch?
I don't know. Has it? What does it mean when it's too big?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. So, like, for example, the executive branch has over 2 million people in it now. So
if a country of 330 million people, how big should it be? What's the ideal number for the federal government? Is it larger or smaller than other democracy federal governments?
Well, you have 2 million people who are unelected who've been appointed to these positions by various people over time, right?
Should we be electing every single federal employee? Is that like the...
No, of course not. But my point is that these executive branches, they're making laws that you and I have to follow.
Well, they don't make laws. They make rules based on laws passed by Congress, right?
Well, yeah, but in effect, they're making laws. So anything they do is published in the Code of Federal Regulations, right? And so these are allegedly within the power that's given to them by certain legislation. But in reality, they're dictating things that are impacting the day-to-day lives of Americans, probably much more than legislation is in many ways.
Well, and so but they have to by virtue of what they do, right? Like, how could you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so we have to do that. And also, we would say now that they're not making their own rules. They're literally making rules in the only possible way you could ever make a rule from the Congress. There's only one way to do it now. It's not even up to their interpretation anymore, right?
No, it is. So are you talking about the reverse of the chevron?
Correct. Yeah. Loper means now that there's only one permissible way for statutory construction of any law passed by Congress. And if anybody disagrees, they can sue them, and the Supreme Court will tell you exactly what the law means. So the federal government is even less deference now when it comes to creating rules from laws.
No, I think you're misinterpreting that ruling a little bit. So you're right that Chevron deference was overturned, but it doesn't mean that there's only one possible way. So there's still going to be deference given to, all of these different agencies, all of these different departments.
Absolutely not. That was the whole point, was that statutory construction is existing solely in the domain of the judiciary, that there is absolutely no deference given, and there is only one permissible construction of a rule from a law.
if it's challenged. That's my point. So
I got it. Sure. I mean, but that's true. But that's like saying everything is legal unless it gets like challenged by a court. I mean, right?
But practically that does make a big difference. So they have deference up to the point until it's challenged. So most rules within the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, are still going to be deference of these agencies unless they are challenged. In which case, it's going to be 99% of them are still going to be deference. Yeah. So
But I mean, like that's the only way the federal government can work, right? They have to make rules from laws in order to be able to do anything, right? Like there's no other world where
exactly.
Okay.
But there's a difference between saying that and like that's obviously the way it's going to work, and then saying like the size is still an issue, because so we engage in deficit spending, right? Both administration, all parties engage in deficit spending, which is going to come, it's going to be an issue over time. Tons of that deficit spending is this discretionary spending by these different federal agencies. And that has to be on the table if we're going to seriously consider cutting down the expenditure of our government.
So put it on the table.
How else do you do it?
Well, Congress is the one that approves the budget. So you would go to Congress and you would start to cut some of these programs. You certainly wouldn't do it illegally by creating a faux office within the executive department and then having that go through.
It's not a faux office.
It kind of is, right?
So you don't think it was within Trump's power to create, because it wasn't really a new department. It was just a rebranding of the United States Digital Service.
I super disagree, and that's definitely not true. The Doge was...
Well, the executive orders, that's what it says.
I'm aware that the executive order says that, but the USDS's original mission was only to do digital upgrades to make services more efficient around the federal government. They absolutely were not created to do waste, fraud, or abuse, and they absolutely weren't there to cut spending in ways that was contrary to the congressional statutes that authorized the creation of those departments. For instance, the USDS would have never had the authority to go in and hack all of USAID out, but Doge somehow did that. And USDS was never even looking for waste, fraud, or abuse at all, which is obviously beyond what Doge has done. So I know that they wanted to play that trick of like rebranding the USDS is just becoming Doge, but there's a reason why 20 of the USDS people just fucking quit as soon as the merger happened. Like, you agree, right? The Doge's mission is way different than what the USDS mission. It's not a stretch. It's totally different. It's not at all in the same purview of what they were doing, right?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how you package it, I think.
No,
but yeah,
it doesn't. No, hold on. USDS's mission was literally, if you do too much shit by paperwork or whatever, we're going to help you convert it to Excel or email or whatever. That was USDS's mission.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. But that's a mission grounded in what? Making things more efficient in the government, which is if you follow Elon and what he talks about on Twitter, which you're at your own peril, obviously, but he'll talk about like that's kind of one of Doge's main features, right? Is they're going in trying to make things more efficient. And yeah, you can argue about the cutting fraud, waste, and abuse part of it. Now, that's related to efficiency in a way.
No, it's not. Wait, why are you saying that? That's not true.
Because as something becomes more efficient, how do you make something more efficient? Is often by cutting waste, cutting abuse in many cases.
It's the U.S. Digital Service, USDS.
Right.
Imagine if I were to say, here's a way to make every car in the entire United States more efficient. Kill your family because now you have less bodies in the car and now your gas mileage is going to be better. That's not, I mean, is it making it more efficient? I mean, kind of, but not really. It's obviously that's way outside the scope of what the USDS was originally defined as.
Yeah, it's far-fetched and it's going to be challenged. And yeah, it's definitely a stretch of what the USDS was. I'm just saying, like, there's a...
Well, hold on, it's not even... It's illegal. It's illegal, right? Doge cannot... Even the president cannot cut away USAID, right? He can't do it. Okay.
I agree. Right. I agree with that. The USAID things, I agree. That's a thing. But so going back to my main point though, don't you think, like, how do you do that thing? Because you know and I know that. But I mean, yes, kind of.
No, exactly. But the problem is that's hard. And now we have to actually take a real look at programs. We got to decide, what do we want to cut? And Trump is not an effective leader. And the Republicans in Congress don't know how to govern. So it's easier to just have Elon Musk run through and just take a hatchet to everything. So you don't have to actually make hard decisions about what we should be funding. But that's, yeah, if the funds are appropriated through Congress, if these departments are created through Congress, then you have to defund them through Congress. But that's governance. It's hard. There's a reason why we have lawmakers that specialize in making laws and doing legislation. It's not meant to be ran through with one, 105 IQ dipshit who's addicted to ketamine, and to have him like take a hatchet to every part of the government he doesn't like because this is DEI or Reuters in the contract.
I mean, I probably disagree a little bit with your characterization of Musk. I think that he's certainly not going through and doing all this on his own. He is like you said, probably making things up as he goes, and he's doing all these things. You can argue with the different techniques and everything, but I mean,
well, like, do you agree, for instance, that he's engaged in like blatant lies, like the Social Security dead person thing? Like, these are just blatant lies that he's engaged in.
Right.
So how much credibility? So if we see that he's got the legality is questioned, there are multiple TROs now that the government is defying that's been issued against them, right? We see, so the legality is questionable at best, okay? And that's in the best interpretation. We see that he's intentionally lied about things. All the new information that he's given us are already available on government websites, and they haven't shown proof of any waste, fraud, or abuse yet. Why would I trust this person anymore? Like that, like if it was a Democrat, we'd just be done, right? We'd say, okay, well, fuck that. Obviously, they're not trustworthy. Why would you even give him another chance?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's going to be for Trump to decide. But see, here's the thing, though. Do you think that he's like, you seem to think he's just a total disaster and that he's had no impact whatsoever on anything good with the government, and even question his impact in his personal life and his businesses? I mean, do you think he's just a complete fraud?
When you say fraud, like in terms of Doge or in terms of his whole life or whatever?
Just everything. It really his whole life. Like, because there's that whole line of reasoning where he started out with his dad's money and he just bought companies that other people had already built, and then he went through, and now this is just essentially his work in the government is just an extension of that.
I mean, I like Tesla moved electronic cars forward a lot, or electric vehicles forward quite a bit. I feel. I think SpaceX has done really cool stuff with rockets and Starlink and everything else. Now, how much of that was because Elon is a genius versus he was just a really tough owner who was able to push his employees a lot?
105 IQ.
Well, I mean, when I hear him talk now, and I've challenged anybody, I think I even tweeted this out earlier, show me anything of him speaking in the last 2 or 3 years that he doesn't just sound like a bubbling dipshit, because he sounds like an idiot now when he speaks about anything. He sounds like every incompetent middle manager, bureaucratic dipshit that anybody's ever had to deal with in an office environment ever, right? Who likes the guy who says, give me an email and send me 5 things you did this week? The fuck? This is like the most bureaucratic waste of time ever. And you keep talking about unelected officials. He's also unelected. Like, what? Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's a stupid argument against Musk in his current position, though, because people say, oh, he's an unelected official, so is the entire executive branch. That's neither here nor there.
No, I don't think it's the same, because the entire executive branch, when you look at all the cabinet members, they at least require confirmation by the Senate in order to get through. Elon Musk didn't require any confirmation by the Senate because he's not in a real department, right?
Yeah, but the cabinet's the cabinet, right? So the cabinet, what is there, 15, 16 cabinet members now? Mm-hmm. And the rest of the executive branch is unelected, and most don't require confirmation by anybody.
Sure,
so
but the rest of the executive branch doesn't have individual members that are running through and changing every single other department. But Elon Musk seems to be the strongest cabinet member, and he has no... he spoke more than any other cabinet member 20 times over in the cabinet member meeting, and Elon Musk isn't even a confirmed real member of the cabinet. The administrator that they named for Doge was some lady, I don't even remember, Ceason or something, or Gleason. They named somebody who's not even Musk, so it's like, but...
Yeah. So what are your issues with the current state of the left? So you have obviously a lot of concerns with where the right's going and their allegiance to Trump and maybe Elon. Do you feel like the political left, and I'm not saying you agree with everything they're doing, but do you feel like it's in a good spot?
I feel like the center left, I think that they've done a good job legislatively in terms of governance. They just need to work on their messaging more. For some reason, all of our far left media hates our candidates, whereas all of the MAGA media is like sycophantically in line with every single talking point, from Joe Rogan to Tim Pool to Charlie Kirk to Donald Trump to Vance to the AFD to every conservative around the world gets like all of their thought things like beamed in from Starlink or something. And then on the left, all of your far left platforms, it feels like your far left platforms just fucking hate the candidates. Like I feel like a loser, or I felt like a loser talking about wanting to vote for Kamala or Biden when I was going on left-leaning shows. It's just like whether it's Breaking Points or whether it's like Sam Seder, the Majority Report, or whether it's like just all of these like far left shows online. You know, your Hassan Pikers, your far left people on Twitch. I don't know. Just it felt like the center left people just didn't have the same type of cultural penetration. Although hopefully they'll get more popular, I guess. Yeah.
Who's the candidate for that?
Candidate right now, I'm not sure. We need somebody who can command attention like Trump does.
No, I mean like the candidate to penetrate the culture a little bit more, like a Rogan, because that's been batted around a lot right now. Like the left needs their own Rogan, or the left needs their own whoever. Is it Destiny?
Probably not. I think I'm too extreme in a lot of ways, and I'm not a big fan of governing. I just like screaming at people. But just the center left just needs to get, I think, like a more positive message about America. I feel like there are some issues that they need to drop like guns and fucking shitting on lobbyists and billionaires all the time feels like not the most popular messaging, but it needs to be somebody who can command a lot of attention. Like an AOC type figure would be able to do it. Somebody who could just be on social media a ton is really, really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, the billionaire thing I think is a major problem for the left because everything is just like, tax billionaires more or tax millionaires more. We saw this with the Social Security stuff recently, and it doesn't even make sense because something like Social Security is only applied to income, and none of these billionaires make income. So raising like the cap on Social Security wouldn't even matter for billionaires. That is. So it's like the same default talking points every single time, and it's become very like moralistic. So you're either I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like the left has taken like the right's moralistic stance and adapted it to their own 2 or 3 pet causes, and then that's where the conversation occurs on the left. And most of the country now turns a lot of that off.
Maybe. Like, well, I mean, but the right
I'm not saying you.
Things too, sure.
Well, of course. And it's probably just the culture wars that we were talking about, the back and forth with the culture wars. But I think very little of the left's dialogue, like on TikTok, which is where I'm on a lot, goes anything beyond, billionaires bad, supporting marginalized groups, and probably Trump bad. So like those 3 items dictate 95% of what's talked about.
Yeah, sure.
From most of these creators. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, probably. I think all the political conversations are really bad right now, but they're just as bad on the right, or maybe worse because they're blatantly talking about doing illegal things and defending them and everything. So. Yeah.
So what do you think is the biggest existential threat to American existence right now?
Well,
you can't say Trump.
When I look at parallels to the Nazis, because that's what we always like to look at parallels for, I feel like the biggest issue we have right now is we don't have any strong defenders of liberal democracy in the United States. And I think when the country gets to... it doesn't feel like we have not large defenders of liberal democracy. You can argue that the Democratic Party is, but the progressive media doesn't, and nobody on the right who is part of MAGA does. Nobody on the right now, I would say, does at all. So if you start to get into a minority position where fewer and fewer people are willing to defend the concept of liberal democracy, then both sides are just going to continue to explode out as much as they can the executive powers and whatever else they can take from people, and then we're just going to descend into some chaotic, whatever comes from that, I guess. I don't know, civil war or some crazy government or some whatever.
You think that's actually a possibility?
Yes, I think it is.
An actual, like a civil war type event?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nobody in 1900 thought that World War I was going to be on the way. I don't think anybody in 1920 thought that Germany was going to, take over 90% of Europe or whatever. Like, I mean, it seems hard to see these things until they happen. But I mean, right now we're having so many democratic backslides, and the open disdain that I feel the right has for this country and for any kind of like democratic order, and the open championing of weaponizing parts of the government to go after people all the way up to the lawmaker level is very scary to me. Like that Eric Adams stuff is just fucking insane to me. The January 6th pardons were insane to me, but nobody on the right even cares.
Do you think that the comparisons that some on the left have of Trump and that certain German dictator, I don't know if you say his name on here, do you think those are overblown?
I mean, it depends on how they use them. The problem is when people like talk about Hitler, people always talk about the guy who's killing people in concentration camps, but that wasn't the thing that Hitler did the first day in office. So I'm not really as concerned with Hitler. I think that when you hit your really bad points in history, it's more important to look at the things that led up to those points that created the conditions for those people to take over. And that's definitely been created. And that I think we have that environment now in the United States. So could Trump be a Hitler type person? Maybe Vance will be that person. Maybe. But the environment's been created for it. Nobody seems to be fighting against it.
You think Vance could actually be that person?
Sure. I mean, he said he would have assisted in overthrowing the election on January 20th, in 2020. So, or in 2021, I guess.
Yeah, but that's a big gap between that and then saying that he's the next Hitler.
I don't think so. Well, I mean, Hitler gained all of his power, a lot of it through the Enabling Act, right? These are just harmless acts passed in the Parliament or in the Congress that gives more and more power to the executive. Like, it always seems like inconsequential until it isn't, and then things fall into place retrospectively, and you're like, oh fuck, maybe that was really bad,
Yeah, you never know the consequences of the actions as you're like living through them. It's always in retrospect that you kind of see that. That is true. Very true. So who's the best person that you've debated with as far as, not like morally who's the best person, but when you've had those conversations with people either on the left or the right, who do you have the most respect for as someone like a purveyor of ideas in those debates?
I don't know. The politics conversations online are trash, so probably nobody. They're all horrible.
All of them?
Yeah, they're pretty bad. Yep.
What about the ones that you've had, though?
They're really bad.
Still bad?
Most people don't have any. Yeah, I would say I feel like.
I mean, you've talked with a lot of the heavy hitters. You've talked with. I'm not saying heavy hitters intellectually, but like some of the big names. You've had a debate with Ben Shapiro, didn't you?
Ben Shapiro was a horrible conversation. I mean, Ben Shapiro was horrible. This whole idea of like Donald Trump was a dictator, but it's okay because the guardrails will hold is just a fantastically insane argument to me. And you would never make the same argument for another person ever. It's like giving your daughter a gun because you know that the guy that she's dating is a rapist, but at least she has a way to defend herself. Like, it's just an unbelievably crazy statement, unhinged statement to me. And now, like, when I'm trying to explain things to my audience, usually what I'll do is, like, we were just talking about, like, what's wrong with tariffs. I can just play Ben Shapiro videos from 6 years ago before he became a Trump sycophant, and I could show, oh, well, this is why these things are bad. But now he'll defend every single action that Trump does. So I have no respect for Ben Shapiro, probably less for him than anybody else because he knows better. The Jordan Peterson argument was insane. This guy doesn't know anything about any of the shit that he talks about, whether it's global warming or whether it's VAERS and vaccines or anything else. Like, Candace Owens is insane. I don't know. I mean, I don't know where these good conversations are. I don't think I have any of them. I think it's just insane caricatures of opinions and positions online now. It's all rhetoric and slogans and TikTok shorts.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Have you talked with Tim Pool directly?
He won't talk to me anymore now that I've made it clear that I'm not going to play ball with stupid talking points anymore. But like, I've had conversations with Tim Pool, but he's one of the worst. I don't know if he still secretly takes Russian money or if he's just like a horrible, treasonous anti-American all on his own. But he probably does some of the worst engagement with stuff ever I've seen in my entire life. I don't know if you saw him.
Do you think that there's... Oh, go ahead.
Like him with Luke Beasley, screaming at Luke Beasley, not knowing any of the details of the January 6th stuff. Yeah. And then him afterwards trying to Google what was going on. He's reading a Wikipedia page. He doesn't even know how to look up an indictment. And then the misquoting that he does of the Ahmaud Arbery case, the misciting he does of the George Floyd case. He's just one of the dumbest, worst people in the universe. But
you hear that a lot, the Russian money. Do you think there's actual creators out there taking Russian money to push?
Tim Pool did take $5 million of Russian money. That's proved. We know that.
For sure. Actually, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, it was a tenant money thing. It was routed through another business. He got $5 million for some shitty random show that he syndicated on some YouTube channel. He got $5 million for 1 year's worth of content.
Maybe I need to get into the Russian money business. That's
maybe.
Just kidding. Sounds pretty lucrative.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you being able to have me on for a little bit.
Yeah. Anything else you disagree with? Or?
I mean, I think we agree on a good bit of stuff. Wanted to hear your So I don't know where you said this, but you talked a little bit about in the past how people like Rush Limbaugh and people like Michael Savage were kind of interesting for the right because even if you disagreed with most of where they ended up, they had some pretty deep ideological anchor points, and you could have kind of a policy discussion with people like that. I thought that was an interesting point. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Or just that, like, when you watched the media back in the day, these guys were like your thought leaders and they fleshed things out a lot more. Like, if I'm listening to Rush Limbaugh for 3 hours, it's not going to be for him to just repeat tweets, basically. But if I listen now to like Charlie Kirk or Tim Pool or people that go on Joe Rogan, I'm getting the exact same information that I would get from my mom or from a random MAGA conservative.
Is your mom a random MAGA conservative?
My mom's a hardcore MAGA conservative, yes. My mom and dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you have like good relationships with them still?
They're okay, yeah.
That's good. That's awesome. I could see that. I've not listened a ton to either Rush or Michael Savage in the past, but I've listened enough to know and hear what they have to say. Michael Savage is still going, I think, right?
Probably, yeah.
He kind of descended into some crazy stuff, I think, over time. But
I mean, every Republican is, I feel. I mean, listening even to Ron Paul, like, supporting all the crazy Trump shit is like, Jesus. Well, I used to be a big Ron Paul fan in like 2008 when I was my libertarian phase in college. So,
yeah.
Do you think?
What did you think of? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to ask: is there anything that? Are you at a point now where you think that either not voting, like abstaining from voting, or voting for Kamala would have been better than voting for Trump?
6 weeks in.
It's what?
6 weeks in or whatever it's been. It's March 4th. So whatever that is. I hated Kamala as a candidate. I don't think she was a good candidate at all. I don't think she articulated things well, and I don't think she would have been an effective leader for the country. I don't think she had shown anything in her political career that indicated that there should be any confidence in her. I think that the one thing that you had going, maybe not the one thing, but the biggest thing that you had going for Trump over Kamala, just head to head, and again, I'm just talking head to head here, was that you knew what 4 years of Trump kind of looked like. And I think that even if you were 10% supportive of that, I just felt like you didn't know what you were getting with Kamala at all.
What do you think is one thing that she would be doing worse on now than Trump?
I honestly don't know. I don't know how to answer that because I think that Kamala had some discussion on the policy side, but she threw out some crazy ideas as well. I think that there were some things that she had. Well, I guess that wasn't that crazy. So I know a lot of people point to the unrealized capital gains, but that was just for like over $100 million net worth or whatever it was. So that wasn't too crazy. But I just think that the way that she kind of completely bowed to what I would consider to be the woke agenda, and I hate that term, but just that anyone who I'm trying to think how to explain this, like anyone who brought up any of that stuff, she would essentially give the mic to as if they had all of the moral authority in the world. And I think that was a dangerous place for the country to go.
Sure, but from a policy perspective, like, what do you think is one thing that would have resulted from that?
Well, that plays it, yeah, I was just gonna say that plays itself out in policy. I think you saw that. You see what's happened with like affirmative action programs over the years. You've seen and that's essentially,
sure, but affirmative action wasn't affirmative action ended by the Supreme Court under Biden?
Yeah, right. So it was essentially ended under Biden, but like there's a lot of ways to get around that policy.
But he didn't, right?
Is easy. Well, I'm not saying Biden. I'm just saying like if that's supported from the White House, there's going to be kind of a wink, wink. Like a lot of colleges will do what they want here. All you have to do is not have a written policy for that. You can continue to do business as normal. See, like it's really hard to prove. I'm shocked that case at Harvard or whatever it was, even ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. I think that's difficult. I'm not shocked that an affirmative action case went to the Supreme Court. I'm shocked that all of that information came out as it did.
Okay, this is where my brain is like broken, and I don't know if like where the reality is separated from. When I look at Trump, I can think of probably off the top of my head like 10 over the line things that I think are just absolutely insanely horrible that have happened in just like the past 6 weeks. But then when I try to think of like, okay, well, what would have happened under Kamala or Biden that would have been so horrible if it was another 4 years of them? I always get these things of like the woke agenda or something. And it's like, okay, well, would I rather have a few more woke people in the US, or would I rather have 25% tariffs, unilateral surrender of Ukraine, departure of the United States from the world order? I mean, like January 6th, people all having all their charges dismissed, the dismantling of federal agencies in a way that contravenes law. Executive order to rescind birthright citizenship. Like I have all these things on the table. And then on the other end, it's like, well, there were some woke people. And it's like,
yeah, but do you think that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But like some of that was overstated. Like what you just said.
Overstated? Wait, what did I just say that was overstated?
Like where, for example, you were like, I forget exactly how you phrased it, but you said the unilateral surrender of Ukraine. And that's certainly
that is what he's trying to do, though, right?
I mean, I don't know. Like, it's not my area of expertise, but I don't think Trump is saying like Ukraine surrender and then Russia will get everything that they want. And that's what I hear you saying when you say unilateral surrender of Ukraine.
Because that's what's on the table right now. It's going to be Ukraine surrendering all the territory that Russia currently occupies. And then it's going to be probably a guarantee that Ukraine's not allowed into NATO for 100 years or whatever. And then it's going to be the sanctions are lifted off Russia and Russia.
Well, I mean, the United States kind of already did agree to that, like back in the 90s.
What do you
Ukraine
mean?
Wouldn't be that Ukraine wouldn't be allowed to be in NATO. Because like when Germany, and I'm not arguing for Russia here whatsoever, but I'm just saying like promises are not really, like they didn't really mean anything, right? So what and this is again not my area of expertise, so I want to clarify that. I'm just, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, truly. I thought that when Germany was merged together, right? The idea was that NATO would not take any countries east of that. Essentially, like no countries east of that would be like that NATO wouldn't try to get any more.
Yeah, we don't have to jump into
and the United States.
Yeah, we don't have to jump into all that.
I don't want to jump into that.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say that Germany was reunified in 1990. there were no eastern countries for NATO to take. The not 1 inch eastward quote from Baker had to do with militarizing East Germany if it was reunified. I know that what I'm saying is completely out of sync with what everybody else on the right argues with this, but like you can go and read these conversations from Baker. You can go and look at the world map where the Warsaw Pact was, where the Soviet Union was, and where NATO was. There was no place eastward for NATO to move. That had nothing to do with that. And Gorbachev himself was giving interviews saying that.
But eventually there was. But yeah.
Well, but eventually nobody knew the Soviet Union was going to collapse, right?
Yeah, but
I'm just saying that right now, like for instance, in the Doha agreement with Afghanistan, the United States completely surrendered Afghanistan under Trump to the Taliban. The Afghanistan government wasn't even involved in those negotiations. So I don't know. And looking at Ukraine now, it doesn't seem like Ukraine is getting anything from Russia. I haven't heard a single thing discussed, and Trump seems petrified to criticize Putin on anything. So do you think there's a world where, like, what do you think realistically, if you had to bet money, I won't make a bet, but if you had to bet money, like, what would you guess that Ukraine is going to get from the United States forcing them to surrender here?
I don't know. I truly don't. I don't know. But like, so back to your question though, related to what worse things could Kamala do than what Trump has already done. I agree with you. A lot of what Trump's done, I've not been a fan of, nor was I a fan before he ran for president a second time. But here's what I would say. So I don't think Kamala or Democrats in general have a great understanding of how economics works, I should say. And I think that there's a lot on the right that don't have a good understanding of that either. But so, for example, Kamala she's argued multiple times in her campaign to raise the corporate tax rate again. So it was lowered in Trump's first term under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to 21%. And she had argued raising it to, I think, back up to 35%, if not higher. So that's just one example. But I just don't think that, like, what does that do? What does that accomplish?
So here's the difference. I agree with you. I think that higher corporate tax rates and whatever unrealized tax she was talking about would have been stupid economically. But the difference is that the Democrats tend to, because they are concerned with governance, I feel like the Democrats will listen if they're going to do something that's like disastrous for the economy. Like, for instance, like there's never going to be.
But that's such a general statement. Like, because the Democrats are concerned with governance, they'll listen.
But that's true. Well,
that's unprovable. Like,
I can look at the history. Biden didn't do a corporate tax increase. Biden didn't try to implement a wealth tax or unrealized capital gains. I can look at the governance.
But he would have tried to. He didn't have the support in Congress. So
he wouldn't have had the support in Congress after the election anyway. Then he wouldn't have done it. Whereas Trump will do everything he can unilaterally, like the tariffs that we're getting right now, which are more disastrous than a 35% corporation tax.
Yeah, but so Biden had when I think the first 2 years of his first term, I think he had one or both of the houses, I think, of Congress for like the first 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, when he started in 2020, when he started in 2021.
Yeah, and he didn't do a wealth tax or a corporate tax increase.
Yeah, but my point is, he argued that he was going to do this, and change the tax plan. He didn't even push his own tax plan.
A lot of it probably would have been good economically, which is good because Democrats will listen. If they're like, fuck, this will be a disaster, then they probably won't do it.
Yeah, but my point is that he said he was going to do one thing and then didn't do it. And so how is that any different from what others are doing?
Because he's changing course based on what he feels is going to be best for the U.S. economy. And if I look at the economy under Biden and I compare the decisions he made to the economy under Trump, and especially now the second economy coming under Trump and the decisions that he's making and the motivation for doing so, like if Biden said one thing and then got into office and then we see that, like, okay, well, this probably wouldn't be
the economy was pretty good under Trump. I mean, so they passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act after his first year, I think his first year in office, and the economy did really well. I mean, GDP went up, unemployment went down.
Yeah, but I mean,
but obviously we had COVID hit.
Yeah, but why did it do good? It was just massive deficit spending. There was a huge tax cut, and it wasn't paired with any spending cut from the government. So, of course, if you inject a fuck ton of money into the economy and you don't match that with any spending cuts, of course the economy is going to go up. But then when we cry about inflation 4 years later, now we want to blame Biden on COVID, even though like the PPP and everything was from Donald Trump. And Donald Trump ran his economy really hot even though he came into a good economy. Like,
I agree.
But if you agree, then how could you say that there's a good reason? Like, shouldn't that have been the time if we were going to see fiscal responsibility? Shouldn't it have been Trump coming into government under Obama or after Obama? Shouldn't that have been the time?
Yeah, but I don't think Trump is necessarily like a fiscally responsible president. I'm just saying from a policy perspective, doing things like lowering the corporate tax rate, giving the child tax credit, those types, or doubling the child tax credit in many situations, lowering the tax brackets across the board, which is what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did. I agree with those policies more so than I do with what Kamala was advocating for, which I don't think was helpful. I mean, you increased the corporate tax rate from 21 to 35%. overnight, which I don't know if she would have the support in Congress to do it. Who knows if she would have taken office. I think that's disastrous for the economy. I do.
Worse than 25% tariffs?
No, I'm not saying, but he didn't. So
he did say he was going to. Well, to be fair, he didn't say 25%. Yeah, he said 1,000% tariffs. No, he said this while he was running. We all watched him do that Bloomberg debate. He said tariffs were his favorite word. He said this over and over and over again.
Yeah, but then it takes, and this is on probably anyone who voted for Trump. You have to decide, okay, is what they are saying during the campaign, is that going to be what is actually enacted? Because we all know that those don't align. I mean, we just talked about with Joe Biden.
Yeah, but the difference is because Joe Biden governs, so he has to work with the consent of Congress. And so with Kamala Harris, she can't unilaterally raise the corporate tax rate because of some ideological commitment. But Donald Trump can unilaterally do tariffs if he uses these, emergencies as justifications for doing so. That's the difference.
But we'll see. But that's a little bit disingenuous.
Well, we're seeing it's already happened.
We'll see.
Right?
I know, but we'll see if it's constitutional. I mean, how many things are held up right now in the D.C. circuit? How many things have been challenged? What
do you mean constitutional? I didn't say it was illegal. I'm just saying that if you have an emergency now, Trump can do these things unilaterally, right? I think it is legal right now. The Congress would have to change the law. They've granted this authority to the president, and now he's exercising it. But I think I'm just saying that Trump has the ability to come through unilaterally. Like you have two people running for office. One says, if I'm elected, I'm going to find you with a pistol. I'm going to shoot you. And the other guy says, if I'm elected, I'm going to make sure that you're going to get charged with a crime. You're going to go to court, and I bet they're going to execute you, right? These two things are completely different, right? One person is pointing to a process. The other person is saying they're going to do it on their own. Kamala and Biden are working within the system to pass these, acts or whatever. And Trump is just doing whatever he can unilaterally as president.
I think he's trying to push the envelope a lot on what he can do unilaterally. But you're speaking in too much absolutes here. So it's not like
wait,
Democrat.
Hold on, real quick.
No.
When you say absolutes, I can justify every single thing I said with 400 examples. What do you mean by that?
No, here's what I mean. I think you'll agree with me here. So my point is you're acting like when a Democrat like Biden or Kamala gets into office, they are just content to work within the system, use Congress when necessary, do X, Y, and Z, as if they don't push the limit a little bit as well about what's allowed or what's not allowed, and try to work with outside the system when necessary. And there's going to be pushback constitutionally at times, but there's a ton of examples of that. So while Trump as a president, to his and I think this is a negative about him, he pushes things too far and does things that perhaps are not within the system more than maybe what a Democrat president would.
If we look at the past years of Biden, what's one example of him pushing the envelope in any way comparable to the last 6 weeks?
Well, so I'm going to go back. I'm trying to think of a good example with Biden. I can't think of one off the top of my head. But the first thing that comes to mind is the Affordable Care Act, right? So this is with Obama. So a massive piece of legislation, which I'm not even necessarily opposed to.
Okay, hold on, wait. But even if you want to bring this up, because even if you want to bring this up as an example, the ACA at least was passed by Congress. So that's a totally different.
But it was passed by Congress, pushed by Obama, and they didn't know the constitutionality by which it would even be supported. So my point is you're pushing something that are we going to try to support it under the Commerce Clause? We're going to try to support it as a tax upon the American people, whatever. We're pushing something through that we don't know whether it's even constitutional or not, and it will get reviewed.
Sure,
but we don't know.
But don't you think there's a huge difference? How is it different between getting a congressional majority to pass an act supported by the president versus just the president unilaterally acting? There's a huge difference. No.
Well, no, the president unilaterally acting is allowed under the Constitution. So the Constitution governs when a president can unilaterally act.
I'm not saying whether or not he's allowed. Well, we don't know in all these circumstances so far where they're being challenged with TROs. But I'm just saying, you asked me what's the difference. Well, the difference is one man doing a thing to push the envelope as much as he can, in ways that are probably legal, versus a guy pushing the envelope with an act with a huge piece of legislation passed by the whole Congress. I think that's a far different thing, right?
It's different in kind a little bit. I mean, it depends on the starting point.
There's a difference between a whole congressional act passed and the amount of agreement that you need across both sides of the aisle to pass a thing versus just one man unilaterally with the stroke of a pen making huge changes to the international order and the economy.
No, I agree that there's difference in as far as the number of people that need to agree to pass it. My point is, from a constitutional perspective, there's just as much constitutional gray area of Congress getting involved in something like that, and then some of Trump's executive actions. So, because both are given constitutional authority to do certain things under the Constitution. It just depends on the article that you look at. And so my point is that there's constitutional gray areas all the time. And that's why, in a lot of legislation, they include expedited review provisions where they say this doesn't even have to go to the normal trial court. It goes right up to whatever circuit court for review, because we know it's constitutionally very vague or very gray.
Sure, but I mean, at the end of the day, the ACA survived Supreme Court review, so
as a tax, which is not what they even. So the only way it survived is as a tax.
It survived as a Supreme. So I mean, like that, the Supreme Court is the law. They interpret the Constitution, which is the law of the land. I mean, we can not like it, but I mean, it survived the constitutional review, right?
I actually do like it. So I actually don't think the ACA is necessarily a bad thing at all. I think it. In fact, I wouldn't even be. But
even if I'm just saying, I'm just saying real quick, like the comparison of the ACA, which was however many decades ago, right, a decade and a half ago, comparing the ACA, which was joint, it was legislation passed by Congress, supported by the president, reviewed by the Supreme Court, and okayed. To compare that versus Trump's actions in 6 weeks that have already got multiple temporary restraining orders issued against the government, I just feel like this is like a night and day comparison. It's a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you package it. Yeah, I mean, like I said, you're trying to put me in the box of like defending Trump's executive orders, which I'm not doing. I'm just saying that the absolute statements that you were making, as far as Democrat presidents kind of work within the confines of the law and work as governors, those types of things, like they'll push the boundaries in many ways just as much as Republican presidents have done.
Sure, I just feel like that hasn't been demonstrated yet. If the ACA was joint legislation by Congress, it's way different than pushing the boundaries of executive power. Like if Biden would have been like
pushing
Trump,
the boundaries of legislative power.
Sure, but that requires the legislature. That's a whole ass branch of government working with you, not just one man in the White House, right?
Yeah, but I don't think Trump is going to issue an executive order that revolutionizes the healthcare in America.
Trump tried to issue an executive order rescinding birthright citizenship. Why would he not?
Yeah, but like again, that's I think that's very different than, like, in other words, so birthright citizenship aside, which is obviously it's a cut and dried 14th Amendment issue. It's not going anywhere. I mean, the courts have already settled that issue. So that's not going to go anywhere, which shows that our system is working as it should. A president trying to do something that is outside of his constitutionally given authority to do, it's going to be shot down. There's no way that's going through. But transforming an entire sector of the economy, which is what the ACA did, is a pretty huge deal. And I don't think even in Trump's skewed worldview that he would try to do something like that through executive order. Like, he knows that would have to go through the proper legislative channels. And so,
maybe only
I'm not,
because
I'm not arguing this the same thing. I'm just arguing that each party has been willing to play outside the lines and try to push things through in certain ways. And sometimes they're allowed constitutionally, sometimes they're not by the courts. And so, you have to let things fall where they may. I mean, that is the reality.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't see that both sides have been playing by the same rules here. I feel like especially under Trump, they've been pushing this way, way, way beyond in ways that I think, especially if you're a constitutional guy, should make you very worried or very afraid.
I've posted many videos on, I think, the constitutional issues with a lot of what Trump's trying to do. Yeah, I'm very concerned about he's been using executive orders that far exceed the authority granted to him within the Constitution. Sure. I think I did a whole video on the birthright thing.
I mean, the executive order of him literally saying that him and the Attorney General are the law and the last interpreters of the law, like totally trying to usurp the judiciary. That's pretty wild.
Or where he said, wait, what was the one where he quoted Napoleon and basically said he was
you can't break the law if you're saving the country? Yeah.
Yeah, right. No, and I think it's super dangerous rhetoric. And I did a whole video on that one too, actually. And the responses I got from MAGA were, hey, Trump's just trying to rile feathers. He doesn't actually want to do that or anything, which is, you could say that about anything. It's like what do they call it? The gap theory, where you can just explain away anything as if he's just kind of talking crap.
Sure. Okay, then I'm curious, I guess, one final question I would have then. What could Trump do that would cross the line where you're like, okay, fuck, now this wasn't worth voting for him?
I think that, so a lot of my background is in kind of the business economics side of things. So the tariff thing, the tariff conversation, I think if that gets any worse, And what I mean by worse is if these tariffs, for example, on Canada and Mexico become just indefinite, or we start putting tariffs on the EU or EU countries that seem just completely out of left field and not based, like you said, in any national security concerns or anything. And this keeps going. So in other words, it becomes more than just like a leverage, quote unquote, leverage tactic. And I know you argue with the leverage thing, and I do too.
And also, just to be clear, because it's not just a leverage thing, it's already happened. We have these tariffs are here now. So how long would they have to stay before you're like, okay, well, fuck, this was just not good.
I don't know about a number of days. But see, like, I know you're trying to corner me into a position, like if the tariffs are here 15 days, and I think, whatever. I think that you constantly get new information, you're constantly getting new data. And so I think if what Trump said about tariffs across the board, and he used that phrase a number of times, turns into more of an actual reality where he's not just using that as a negotiation anchor point, but is using that to, for example, try to raise revenue for America. I think that's when it becomes a major issue. And I certainly I have been, but I'll continue to be super critical of it and be like, this could have been a mistake. This could have been a mistake.
Okay. And I guess my only frustrating point, to reiterate again then, is that like the issue that we had with Kamala was that she was saying some things, and it's possible that maybe they would have tried to do these things, and just the possibility that some of these actions might have been bad, even if they wouldn't have been able to do it, that's enough to say, like, I could never vote for that. The 35% corporate tax rate hike, which I don't think she would have done. I don't even know if you think she would have gotten that through Congress. That's enough to be afraid of it. But Trump, who's already done these tariffs, already has more tariffs announced for the EU in April. But
after he took office. So my point is,
no, Trump was talking about tariffs before he took office. Why are we saying after? He said this before. Tariffs was his favorite word. He said it before he got elected.
No, I know, but Kamala said these things before she would have gotten elected. So my point is, they both said things. But
Kamala can't unilaterally raise the corporate tax rate. She can't do that.
But yeah, of course. But like the president's, like, it's the bully pulpit. They can try to do whatever they want, right? They can push Congress to try to do certain things, and they can do X, Y, and Z. And when Trump talked about tariffs, like, you didn't know what he was going to do. You didn't know if he was going to actually do what he said he was going to do. Trump says a lot of things that he doesn't do. The candidates on the left say a lot of things that they don't end up doing. And like we just talked about with Biden, and like how he was going to change the tax plan X, Y, and Z, and he couldn't get the support. So like there's a lot of things that are said, and you have to figure out, like, okay, what do you think is actually going to happen? What is not? I mean, we're 6 weeks in. We're in a very short time period. I think that there's going to be possibly some good things that happen. I think there's probably been some good things that have already happened, and you're going to always look at it from kind of what are some good things? Lens.
What are some good things that have already happened?
I told you. I said I think that a lot of what Elon is trying to do in the executive branch is a positive. So the executive branch needs to be reduced in size.
But what? We don't even have a size in mind. How big should it be? Is 1 million too big? Should it be bigger? Is it larger than other branches?
I don't think it's a number. I think that you need to go through and see what is the fraud, waste, and abuse that's happening.
But you can not fighting fraud, waste, and abuse, right? That's not what they've done so far. Like what fraud, waste, and abuse was found in USAID before they cut the funding for it?
Yeah, I haven't seen. Like I said, the USAID.
Nobody's seen it. Nobody's seen any of it, or any of it, or the U.S. Treasury payments being froze. What for waste, fraud, and abuse they found? Nothing so far.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. But over time, I think that looking to cut certain things, even if it's not fraud, waste, and abuse, is cutting waste and too many things that we don't need. And I think that's a positive thing in general, because
isn't that what the OIGs were for? The Office of Inspector Generals?
Yeah, maybe. But like this is pushing that a little bit. For sure. And you can argue with the methods, for sure. I think that it probably stands more within Congress, and that's probably what needs to happen. But this is pushing the issue to the forefront, which needed to happen. We can't continue going in deficit spending. People think that this can just go on indefinitely, and it cannot. The only reason, so let me put it to you this way. The only reason that the United States right now is where it's at economically is that people want to, other countries, and then you and me, other people, want to buy United States bonds, and the interest rates are super low, right? So the United States can be where it's at. The moment that there's less confidence in America economically because of that, interest rates go up. There's not the opportunity to borrow nearly as cheaply as we've been borrowing, and all of that starts to we death spiral. And so that's the thing that can probably destroy America faster than anything else. So we're talking about all this other stuff like, this rate or that rate, or like X, Y, or Z needs to happen. But when the rubber meets the road, if America does not get control of its spending problem, eventually it's gonna teeter off the ledge. And so, what does America need to do to get a hold of its spending problem? I think the executive branch is a great place to start.
I just like that. It's just like I don't understand anything that was just said. I'm just so confused because the current projections are like $20 trillion of additional debt over the next 10 years. That's what the current projections are, because he wants to extend the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. He wants to extend that. We don't see any real cuts being made from government. We can talk about the federal government all we want, but the reality is non-discretionary spending makes up 70% of our budget, and we're not cutting Medicare and Social Security, and we haven't.
But like the left accuses that. So
I'm not talking about the left accuses. I'm just saying that realistically, do you think the Republicans are asking for a $4 trillion increase in the debt ceiling, or did we already get it? So Trump hasn't shown himself as being somebody that can effectively manage a budget at all in his own personal life, whether it's through multiple bankruptcies or whether through the federal government, when he came in with a hot economy and still ran larger and larger deficits. And all the projections are that the deficit's going to get massive even more. So I just don't see how, if that's your issue, I don't know. Yeah, it just.
Well, you asked me what I thought was something good that the administration has done within the first 6 weeks. And I think bringing those issues to the fore and having a real conversation about, are these specific departments or agencies necessary?
But we're not having a real conversation about it. That's the issue. If you want to do something about your deficit, your fiscal policy, there's two things that you can do. You can either increase your income or you can decrease your spending. We are never, and I'm sure you agree, we are never saving a significant amount of money. Even if we had a godlike figure come down and find every amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, what is it, 3%, maybe 4%, 5% if we're generous, of our discretionary spending, like that's it. You're not saving much. And Trump hasn't talked about cutting any spending for real, and we're dramatically decreasing our income.
I agree.
So there's no path forward. How do we see right now that we think the deficit is going to get smaller, or the debt's going to start to go the other way? The last surplus we had was under a Democrat president. It was under Clinton.
Yeah, but to say at most we're getting 3 to 4%, from cutting spending, I don't think that's nothing. I mean, I think that's important to look at. And by the way, I actually think that we need to look at increasing, how can we tax the wealthy more? I think that's an important conversation to have. And I don't think it's probably through the income tax.
What tax
so are
would
there
it be
ways
through?
to get, it's probably some type of consumption tax. I think that it has to be
consumption tax. How would you target a consumption tax towards wealthy people?
I don't know. You'd have to try to. I think there's probably ways you could try to figure it out.
Why not just a progressive income tax just be like the easiest way to do it? I feel like that's like the easiest.
No, I don't think a progressive income tax would be good at all to do, because millionaires and billionaires don't make income like the rest of us do. So like Elon Musk, he's worth how many hundreds of billions of dollars. What's his income? Almost nothing. And
sure, there's two things. One is I don't think that we are trying to make all the money of the government by just taxing the handful of billionaires we have. But two, there's other policies you get as well. For instance, I think that you shouldn't be able to borrow against anything that you haven't stepped the basis up in. I think that's an easy way to get rid of the whole borrow bullshit, where you can borrow money against your appreciated assets without ever paying tax on it, and then boom, you solve that problem.
Yeah, I want to go back though to I don't see. Yeah, you maybe solve that problem, but overall, I think you need a broader way to get at the wealth of the very wealthy in the country. I agree with that. I think that there's a lot of wealth sitting out there that's just really hard to get at because there's so many tax shelters for wealthy people. So whether that's real estate or just investment in general, whether it's investment in companies in the stock market, that's really hard to tax. And I think Kamala was trying to get at that by proposing this unrealized capital gains tax, where you could tax the gains without it before it was ever even realized on people that I think had over 100 million net worth. But that particular method, I don't think would have been helpful either. So I think
I'm curious, is there a single thing that Trump has suggested to increase revenues in the government besides these tariffs?
No, the only I've seen is tariffs. Yeah, I haven't seen anything else.
And if assuming that, there's a hidden third way to increase your tax revenues as well, right? Which is to increase the size of your economy. And we saw the Atlanta Fed or whatever was projecting a 3% contraction. So I don't know. I don't understand if like budgets are a thing we care about. I just have no idea. Because you said he hasn't even suggested a single thing to increase revenue. So I don't know, man. It seems pretty dicey.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I just think I don't understand like the situation that we are in. So I think that we had two candidates that were, I don't think good, either of them, truly. I honestly don't think Kamala would have been any better. I think that she would have tried to, yeah, maybe she would have tried to work within the system a little bit in her first couple months. That's very possible. But like, I don't see her dramatically improving the position of the United States in her first, in her first term as president.
I mean,
so
do you think that Biden did a good job? Do you think, like, for instance, all these things that Trump is taking credit for now, do you think the CHIPS Act was good to incentivize local manufacturing?
I don't know. I would need to do a deeper dive into the CHIPS Act. I mean, obviously I've heard of it. I don't know if it's good or not. I think that incentivizing particularly companies that are working towards our energy independence is a positive thing for the most part.
Okay.
And I think that Trump will do that. I really do. I think that he's talked about that. Obviously, Musk is all for that. So to the extent that Trump has Musk has Trump's ear, I think that there's going to be some movement in that direction. I think that Trump is,
with all the energy that we get from Canada, do you think that these tariffs are going to have a negative impact on our energy consumption in the United States?
I do. Yeah. And that's why I think they're terrible. I think they're absolutely awful. But I think that I would say within the next 10 years, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I'd say within the next 10 years, there's a very real possibility, if we incentivize enough, if we incentivize private industry enough in this area, that solar becomes a replacement for a lot of this. I really do.
Yeah, but Biden made the largest green energy investments ever, and Trump is talking about clean coal. How do we compare these two things here?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think it's hard to compare.
Well, I feel like it's really easy. If you look at the infrastructure bill that Biden passed, it was the largest investment in green energy in the history of the United States, and Trump doesn't even like green energy. He blames it for the Texas power grid problems.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's rhetoric, though. I don't think Trump is opposed to green energy. I think you've seen that. You've seen him talk very positively about what Tesla's done. So I think that he talks as an entertainer to appease his audience. And so I think, you think Trump's anti-green energy? Like, you think
yes.
he would?
I think he's talked about clean coal a ton. He's talked about how important it is to open up our oil reserves more, even though we produce more energy and ship more energy under Biden than we have in all of U.S. history. He was unable to pass any major legislation at all about infrastructure, but anything pointing to helping green energy. I believe the Trump admin has started to rescind, I think, some of the funding that was on the table for solar energy.
Yeah, we need to check on that.
The only thing he said positive, he said positive things about Tesla. Yeah, but his best friend is Elon Musk. I don't know if that's an explicit support of green energy. I don't see any movement in that admin to support green energy. He talks about how the whales are dying and they need therapy from the solar or from the windmills. Is Trump the guy we're looking to?
Did he really?
Yeah, is Trump the guy we're looking to for green energy?
No, I'm not saying that Trump's the guy we're looking to for green energy. I'm just saying I don't think he's necessarily opposed to it. I think he speaks to who he needs to speak to get elected. He's a pragmatist in that way. People will say what they need to say. So like you saw during the campaign where Biden and then Kamala was like backtracking on all their statements about being anti-fracking, right? Like, yeah, of course they probably are anti-fracking, but they're not going to go out and say that. So they got to backtrack because they got to get voters in Pennsylvania.
Well,
so
when you say backtracking, hold on. But the Biden administration supported fracking. Those were statements that Kamala had made in like 2019. Again, the Biden administration was like, we support our local domestic energy.
Yeah. Of course, but like you saw Kamala, I guess, backtracking on it when she was the nominee. And the point is,
our statements in 2019. She's not backtracking over the past 4 years.
I just think she said
what? Well, she was running as a candidate to the left of Biden, though, and the American electorate rejected that message, so she changed her policies accordingly, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As opposed to Donald Trump, who calls it the green new scam.
That's proving my point, though. Like you're proving my point to say that like people say one thing, and then when the message lands or doesn't land, especially if they've already gotten into office, they'll change their perspective. My point is, like, I don't think Trump is necessarily. He will say what he needs to say to get elected, just like a lot of candidates will. And then when he gets into office, he'll do X, Y, and Z. I don't think he has anything personally against green energy. I just think that that's something that it might not line up exactly with what he said on the campaign trail, but whose time in office does.
Okay, I guess
right?
We'll see.
I mean, come on.
I think he obviously hates green energy. He talks about the green new scam constantly. He's obsessed with unlocking clean coal and unlocking domestic energy production for oil and all that.
he's opposed to like the Green New Deal, but like that's very different than being supportive of green energy, of supportive or unsupportive of green
He
energy.
doesn't even know what the Green New Deal is. He just doesn't like green energy because he identifies it with Democrats.
Well, yeah, because proposed legislation like the Green New Deal has identified with Democrats. It's not. It's a completely different thing. I think he talks about green stuff because it gets his base riled up. He talks being anti-green stuff, but when the rubber meets the road, no pun intended, he's going to support what he needs to support to that he feels that the country will do the best on. And I think that you're seeing so many advances in solar technology right now, particularly solar, that within the next 5 to 10 years, Trump, who I think is a pragmatist, and if only being a pragmatist
after these 25% tariffs.
No, listen,
the pragmatism.
We will see. I agree. It looks bad now. I 100% agree with you. But my point is, he's a pragmatist for public opinion. So he will do. So I think there will become a point, and maybe it's during his term, maybe it's during the next president's term, where where solar technology will get so good, right, and it will be so efficient, the transition from solar energy into fueling everything essentially, that he'll have to about face on that. So I just don't think it's wise to say, or not wise, but I just don't think there's no basis to say like he's going to be opposed to all that.
Okay, except all the words and speeches and everything he's given, but we're assuming he's going to change that because he's pragmatic.
Yeah, he likes to be liked.
Okay. Any other final thoughts or questions or anything?
You have anything?
No, I think that was my final question, I think. Yeah, I guess, yeah. Well, thanks for the chat. Do you want to plug your channel or TikTok or anything, or? Yeah,
so like I said, I'm at Matt Dearden 49 on TikTok. So yeah, check me out. Appreciate it. Appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Wait, I guess I'll ask one final thing. Do you have any strong feelings about Donald Trump suing people that he doesn't like their speech on? For like suing the Seltzer pollster in Iowa, suing I think CNN for the Kamala Harris interview. Do these like worry you about like implications for freedom of speech at all, or?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously there's limits to freedom of speech. So we both agree to that, right? Like there's, you have.
I'm not even going to agree to that in the context of these two lawsuits. I mean, obviously I agree. There's tort, we have criminal offenses for types of speech, but to sue pollsters.
Right. So I've not even looked into that at all. Seriously. This is the first time I've heard of the pollster stuff. So I don't want to speak to that just out of ignorance. So
what about him kicking AP and Reuters out of the press office because they wouldn't call it the Gulf of America?
Did he is that why he kicked him out?
Yes.
So I didn't know that either. So sounds bad.
Yeah, I would say so. Do you have any strong feelings about the Eric Adams case? They got dismissed in New York, or?
So get me up to speed on that one. So Eric Adams, he's obviously was the mayor of New York.
He was facing a big federal indictment. As we know, federal indictments are pretty airtight. Part of this federal indictment was about basically stealing public funds from New York City through a scam, a Turkish guy who was fake donating money basically to get New York funds. When Trump came into office, through the deputy AG, Bovee, basically they demanded that, I think it's the Southern District of New York, rescind the charges against Eric Adams without prejudice, so they could be brought again in the future, and that they would review the charges in November after the election, because they felt that the prosecution against Eric Adams had been political, even though they had no issues with anything that was actually brought up in the case. And obviously the prosecutor in front of that case disagreed, as did a few other people in that office, who then were all fired because she said that it's ridiculous. This is a good indictment. I don't know why we would not do this anymore. And then it got to the point to where Bovee was in the room with like 21 different lawyers who were part of the like integrity division or whatever of the DOJ, and said, somebody here needs to rescind these charges or else I'm firing every single one of you. And it seems to be literally just a quid pro quo that now Eric Adams is going to play ball with the government, but the charges were dismissed without prejudice, so they can always be brought back, and they'll review them after the next election. Seems kind of like a horrible, bad thing, but...
Yeah, I mean, the way you explained it, for sure. Yeah, I honestly don't know much about that. So, I mean, I've heard the name, obviously, and here and there. I knew he had charges, but I didn't know much beyond that. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Do you think pardoning all the J6ers was a good idea?
And I honestly, and I'm not just saying that because I don't want to answer this. I honestly have stayed out of that space. I know the very basics of what happened. Probably a blanket. I mean, I don't agree with blanket pardons in general. I don't think that they're smart. It probably should be pretty individualized. So I guess my running answer on that would be like, no, I don't necessarily agree with a blanket pardon for all J6ers, but I've not looked into the specifics of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean, do you? Do you?
No, of course not. I think I would say it was an attempted coup. But
wait, J6 itself was an attempted coup.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Yeah. No, I think Pence did the right thing. I've always stayed on that. I think that was, I don't know what I think else of Pence as a politician, but I think that was a tough moment. And I think it did take some courage to do what he did in that moment.
Sure. Okay. Well,
so
thanks for the conversation. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. If you ever want to talk again, feel free to DM me on Twitter. We can always, chop shop.
All right. Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a good rest of your day.
See you later. Bye. It feels like I said that you have the one like top secret, like super jutsu. Is that what they call it in Naruto? Of like, oh, I haven't heard of that thing. Whenever it's a bad thing that Trump has done. I feel like, especially over the past year, as I've covered more policy and I understand like how the processes work more, and we've read through Supreme Court cases, it just seems astounding to me that we can look at the fear of Kamala or Biden, and it's like, what are we afraid of? And then it's like the most nebulous things possible. And it's like, well, why didn't Biden do these? And it's like for the most nebulous reasons ever. And then it's like, okay, what about these 500 concrete, absolutely horrible things that Donald Trump has done? And it's like, well, maybe he'll undo it. And I don't know how bad that one, and I don't know anything about this. And I'm not sure if that's, it's like, what is there? What could he possibly do to lose your support publicly?